If you're hunting for horror movie recommendations, then you've come to the right place. Here's my quick list of 5 great Mexican horror movies you might not have seen. Chronos.
Pues no pasó nada.
The debut film from master Mexican filmmaker Guillermo del Toro, Chronos is a fascinating reworking of the sometimes over-familiar vampire story. Elderly antique dealer Jesus Gris is working on a newly bought statue when he finds a strange clockwork device inside. When he winds it up, it comes to life, sprouting legs and crawling over him before injecting him with an odd liquid. It has a profound effect, giving him a new lease on life at the cost of strong urges for sex and blood. And unbeknownst to him, an American businessman and his henchmen are actively pursuing the device. Chronos is a fantastic debut film, and Del Toro's assured approach is clearly on display from the opening minutes. It bears all the hallmarks of his work, particularly in the beautiful design and in the imaginative imagery. Only Del Toro could reimagine vampirism as involving alchemy, clockwork, and immortal insects. And then there's plenty of repulsive set pieces to keep you interested in the film too. Gris's insatiable urge for blood is showcased in a series of visceral moments. Chronos also has a surprisingly emotional story led by strong characters. Most of all Gris, played by Federico Lupi, whose renewed vitality masks a deep existential horror at his own bloodlust. There's also a great supporting performance from Ron Perlman as Angel, kind of heavy, working for the aforementioned corrupt businessman. It's the beginning there of a great collaboration between actor and director. So check out Chronos if you're interested in a very non-traditional take on a classic story trope. The Similars.
En medio de una lluvia infernal, ellos llegaron.
¿A qué hora sale el próximo camión a la Ciudad de México?
¿Qué no escuchó las noticias?
El camión lleva 4 horas de retraso.
In 1968, Mexico is in upheaval as the government cracks down on student protests. And in a bus station near Mexico City, a disparate group of people come together to shelter from a massive storm that has halted all travel. There's minor Ulysses, elderly Clark Martin, pregnant Irene, mother Gertrudis and her son Ignacio. On the radio, their only source of information from the outside world, they hear that the storm isn't just in Mexico, it's expanding to cover the whole world, and that no one knows what's causing it. But there are bigger problems inside the shelter, as people begin to have strange fits. Director Isaac Esban is a really interesting voice in Mexican genre cinema, having kind of exploded onto the scene with this existential loop thriller called The Incident a few years before this movie. In The Similars, he explores similar Twilight Zone-ish territory, this time with a device that's so idiosyncratic and fantastical that I think it would spoil the film to discuss it further here. Suffice to say that the visual invention of this film is astonishing, and it's well worth watching on that basis alone. Thankfully, the film is also bolstered by some great performances from its cast, a fab use of a limited single location that's worked for all the potboiler tension that it's worth, and a great screenplay that keeps the viewer guessing. These films can be a bit of a hard watch, I think. It's a real balancing act to give the audience enough information to stay interested while keeping the story sufficiently under wraps to build mystery. But Esban proves to be adept at this, supplying clever ideas while keeping his big finish hidden until the last moment. Give The Similars a watch for a taste of brain-teaser sci-fi horror. The Book of Stone.
¡Silvia!
Julia arrives at the mansion to become the governess for Sylvia, a troubled little girl. Sylvia herself seems perfectly nice, sweet even, except that she insists on playing with a little boy named Hugo, who the adults see as a stone statue. However, when strange things begin to happen, like torturous pains experienced by Sylvia's stepmother Mariana, the adults begin to suspect that Hugo may not be as imaginary as previously thought. Riffing off a kind of familiar horror plot, you know, a governess arrives at a house to find that it's haunted and that the children are creepy, director Carlos Enrique Taboada crafts a compelling mystery. But this isn't an English country mansion, it's a sunny house and grounds, pretty but curiously sterile. The Hugo statue sits in the middle of the grounds, sweetly smiling while reading the titular book, but more than a little uncanny at the same time. We follow Julia's slow unravelling of the history of the house and of Hugo, which is matched by this great realism, I think, in the characters' relationships and in their kind of psychological profiles. For all that Hugo seems to be imaginary, Sylvia is very much a real child. She doesn't like her governess, she plays up, and she's clearly dealing with an emotionally distant father who's more interested in his new wife than in his daughter. And so you have a first half of this story where it seems like Sylvia's biggest issue is her deep loneliness. And that's a feeling that's ultimately reflected in some of the more supernatural reveals later on. I don't want to say anything more to spoil it for you, but you should watch this if you're in the mood for a creepy throwback horror. Poison for the Fairies.
Cállate, te van a oír. No le habrás contado a nadie lo del encantamiento. No. Si alguien se entera, te puede ir muy mal. Te meterían a la cárcel.
Another film from Carlos Enrique Taboada, Poison for the Fairies, also concerns disturbed children. Graciela lives in a rundown house with her grandmother and nanny, who tells her stories about witches as if they were real. These stories become internalized for Graciela, a way for her to manage the bullying that she experiences at school. Then, when new girl Fabiola arrives, lonely and quiet with very rich and loving parents, Graciela tries to impress her by claiming to be a witch herself, and engineering a series of events to convince her of that fact. Initially presented as a sort of charming, warm, coming-of-age movie, developments in the plot of Poison for the Fairies slowly shift the film into psychological thriller territory. Most of the disturbing content here derives from the increasingly dangerous fantasy that Graciela pulls Fabiola into. Instead of cheap tricks, Taboada opts for a slow burn and psychological realism that is more about the girl's toxic relationship than anything else. There's an interesting visual device in the film too, which is that it focuses entirely on the kids. There are no adult faces shown on screen in the entirety of the runtime, providing a strangely surreal view into the mindset of the young protagonists. Religion and superstition are also important themes in the film, and it's notable that Fabiola is portrayed as being explicitly having been raised as an atheist. So give this a watch when you're looking for a thought-provoking, chiller experience. I think it's also a fairly safe choice for a family horror watch, as there's little on-screen violence in the film, although I'd still recommend that you watch it alone first to check it's suitable before showing it to your kids. Sangre. Definitely the weirdest movie on this list, Sangre was directed by Chilean cult icon Alejandro Jodorowsky, so expect trippy imagery, striking cinematography, and bizarre symbolism. It's the order of the day for a Jodorowsky film. The film's plot follows Phoenix, who we first see as a patient in a mental hospital before flashing back to his difficult childhood working as a magician in a circus. His father is a knife thrower, his mother is a trapeze artist. As Phoenix grows up, he sees many acts of violence and sexual abuse, falls in love with a non-speaking mime, participates in a funeral for an elephant, and attends his mother's religious cult. There's lots of events in the film and plenty of objectionable content, all of which is communicated with a tremendous amount of style. Plenty of bright colours, symmetrical wides, and striking imagery. In particular, Jodorowsky leans on the circus imagery a lot, playing with the similarities between his kind of carnivalesque filmmaking approach and the circus's highly ritualized and performative presentation, then comparing that to the very real rituals and veneration that is involved in religion. All of that adds up to a film that is certainly one of the most memorable horror movies, if not at all a straightforward one. So give this a watch if you're interested in striking, controversial symbolism. And I'm aware that I use the word striking a lot in talking about Jodorowsky's work because it's very hard to say like anything short about his work otherwise. It is really potent. There you go, there's another one. And that's it from me for this list of 5 mind-blowing Mexican horror movies. But if I missed anything, I'd love to hear your recommendations in the comments below. And until then, have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.